All right, very cool. So we're live. Welcome. My name is Jamal Malik. I am the managing partner for Sales Advantage, and with me, as I mentioned, is Amit. Amit, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good morning.
Hey, Amit. As we kind of break into this discussion, it'd be great. Could you maybe kind of share a little bit about yourself, maybe your role, anything else you think is relevant to this discussion?
Absolutely. My name is Amit Panchal. I'm the Director of Solution Sales in our Microsoft's Modern Workplace business. I co-lead a team of 20 experts supporting the sale, the adoption, and deployment of Microsoft technologies. My work helps the organization understand what's happening in the landscape so that we can, of course, build better products, sell better products, but also help our customers be successful. My team and I support North and South America. Been at Microsoft about 8 years. Prior to this, I worked in a variety of technology organizations, worked for McGraw-Hill, Standard & Poor's, Louis Vuitton for a bit. And then prior to that, I was a U.S. Navy veteran, and I also teach part-time at the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
Very cool. You got a pretty interesting and diverse background, and obviously, Amit and I go way back. We worked together as well while we were at Microsoft, and I got nothing but good things to share about Amit. Really stand-up guy. So again, thanks so much, Amit, for joining us. So we talked about the topic, right, which is we're having discussion with customers. How do you position the platform conversation versus best of breed? Now, before we actually kind of maybe dig into this, could you maybe kind of share a little bit more context as to, what does it mean? What does trying to have a conversation around helping our customers make a platform decision versus best of breed? What does that really mean?
So I think speaking from a technology point of view, many of our senior IT and business leaders came up through the ranks over time. When companies were building their own data centers, they were building their own applications and systems, and that was great. It worked really wonderfully for a long period of time, and it got us to where we are today. And as part of this, customers were taking a piece of a database from here, a piece of an application from that vendor, and they were stitching it together to make it work. That's why you see many of these companies have these large IT staffs. But as time progressed, we saw the cost, the servers, the database, the maintenance contracts, the heating and cooling. All these costs end up being exponentially, and at times the cost of the equipment was actually more than the profit or the cost of the application itself was, right? At one time, we had a cost of $5 million to run a system, but the application is only bringing in $1 million. So was it really effective? But then, as time progressed, we began the paradigm of the cloud, and we saw the cloud able to deliver newer technologies at a streamlined functionality at a fraction of the cost. So now, how do we decide? How do we make that pivot from building your own solutions and applications to one that can be bought off the shelf and stitched together, and it's available for use when you need it at the time you need it as well?
So maybe kind of play that back to you, and you let me know if I'm understanding correctly, right? So typically, when organizations make IT purchasing decisions, the first inclination is let's buy the best product that is out there that meets our need, obviously, right? And we all know that to build a business capability, typically it's never just one product, right? It's typically an amalgamation, or it's a combination of products and services, right? That's going to help meet a business need. And so your argument is, hey, if you've taken that best of breed approach, you may have been spending too much to build the business capabilities that you're looking for versus taking more of a platform approach, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what is the platform kind of pitch? How do you first, I think, identify a customer who this might be a good conversation for, or actually, what is the benefit again? I mean, there's a lot involved with, right? If you've already invested in something, to migrate into a platform, to get the right people on board to make that decision. I imagine it's a pretty difficult sell. Yeah.
So well, let's break it down, right? From a best or breed approach. Of course, being selfishly, I'll speak about Microsoft. Microsoft is the best known email platform out there. you have email. But then if you look at the whole thing required for a user to do their email, they have to log into the device. They have to go ahead and make sure that device is secure. They log in, they send files, and then they go ahead and encrypt the files. Then you have compliance and you have audit. All these things are different pieces. And in a normal, early on in the best of breed, you would have picked a identity provider, an email provider, a storage provider, a compliance provider, and so forth. At the end of the day, you have 7 different providers who are stitching together to solve this one thing. Can the user send email securely and properly and it's auditable? Simple. But now you come in with all these 7 different providers, you have gaps in the sense that who do I call when things break? Is it this customer? Is it this vendor? Is it that vendor? And next thing you have finger pointing, right? And all those 7 different solutions, let's be honest, the IT guy supporting that, he'll never know everything end to end. It ends up being troubleshooting, very, very costly for troubleshooting, very costly for maintenance, very costly for support. All that becomes challenging. Now, if you go to the platform side of the view in this scenario, you have, and not to make it a product pitch, but one platform, whether it's us, Google, Amazon, wherever, can deliver the identity, the email, the storage, the security, the compliance. It ends up putting everything together. And the example I'll share is that in the on-premise world, you could build a car, you could build a BMW seat, a Ferrari engine. All that will work in the on-prem world. But go into the cloud world, when you try and stitch things together, ends up becoming complex and complicated and challenging. And now we can deliver a better unifying experience because you have one productivity solution, one analytics, one cloud, one vendor, one support contract, one marketplace, and one unifying theory at the end of the day.
Okay, so a couple of questions kind of spring to mind, right? So number one is, and I'm gonna work through all of these, but the first thing comes to my mind is, obviously you're advocating for the modern workplace solution that has all these kind of elements, right, that you're talking about. Ultimately, the business capability that we're supporting is modern workplace, right? Sending, communicating, collaborating, getting all that stuff. How do you look for customers? Like, how do you identify a potential prospect that you want to have this pitch with?
So, being in Microsoft, we're fortunate to say many of our customers are our customer already, right? So, what we see is that we ask many customers are beginning their foray into the cloud journey. And the question we try and ask them is, right, where on the journey are you and how can we support you in that journey? And what we see is we have a unique opportunity to understand their vision. Because we know that every customer today is being challenged, is they're being disrupted, whether it's Bitcoin, blockchain, or a startup, right? How can we help align to your business, your vision, your CEO's priorities, and help you achieve that? And it's really important for us in sales to understand the customer's journey and how can we help them do 3 things: find new customers, build better products, and maximize the revenue potential as well. That is where we need to, as sellers, need to truly understand what problem are we trying to solve or how are we trying to streamline things and make things more efficient. If we can answer those questions, I think we'll be in a great position to support our customers and help have the conversation that, Mr. Customer, I see a need here that I could probably help you address and solve.
Okay, so I heard a lot there, but let me just kind of again we'll play back. So typically the focus areas you're trying to help out with is help build better products, find new customers, and what was the last one?
Maximize revenue potential.
Maximize revenue. Okay. So it sounds like to me that the first thing you look for is a customer who is interested in making that cloud journey, right? They want to venture into leveraging cloud. So this customer probably has quite a bit of investments in on-prem technology, right? They're probably providing email collaboration, but they have maybe a fairly large on-premise footprint. So in that scenario, if you're pushing the modern workplace Microsoft Cloud solution, really the migration path is from that on-prem environment into a complete Microsoft platform environment, correct? Is that what you're saying?
We hope so, yes.
Okay, so what happens? Let's kind of kind of put our shoulder into that, right? So what happens if the customer says, "Hey, the amount of time and effort that it's going to take me from getting from an on-prem solution to a cloud solution is too great, right? It's too complex. It'll cost too much. It'll take too long." What's your argument there?
So a couple of things, right? Yeah, I think we know that in this cloud economy, right, it's very consumption-based, consumption-driven. Whether it's Facebook, Google, Microsoft, right? We want to make sure users are using our platform. So we've taken an approach to say that we will help support you in the migration. So we have dedicated engineers, we have dedicated architects who will work with the customer to assess the environment, plan the strategy, plan the migration, and then we work directly with the customer based on their timing, their freeze periods, their blackout periods, and we go, here's how every step of the journey will be there to give them the confidence, and of course, references, of course, examples, and as part of the journey, we'll tell them you need to make these changes in your environment. Your help desk procedures may change. You may have to do some change management, but here we're with you along the journey every step of the way. Versus in the old software days, we sold you software, we kind of hoped you used it, but now we're truly committed with you to make sure the journey to the cloud is seamless and smooth, and you're achieving the efficiencies that was promised.
So there's a lot there, but let's kind of pick on a few things that that really kind of piqued my interest, right? So it's interesting, right? We're no longer talking about a simple port or a move from one technology or migration from one technology. Change management now. We're talking about culture. We're talking about training. All those things need to be part of the conversation, especially when it relates to platform, because you need to mitigate any issues the customer may have around, hey, what is the risk? Like, I got to train my team to use this. Everybody's been using, Linux or some IBM products or Google, right? How do you tackle that? Because I think that's a very interesting, kind of objection, and it's very real. My team doesn't have the skills.
Yes. So a couple of things we've learned in our journey is there's multiple stakeholders who have to be involved. It's obviously the IT guys, make sure they're trained, make sure they understand the new system. Like today, before you had to create an email environment, you bought a server, you installed it. Now all that's been taken care of. So now the IT guys freed up to do other things as well and become more of a value add to the organization. So is he confident? Is he secure? Does he understand his new duties is not break fix, but managing a cloud environment? Number one. Procurement. How do we support the procurement team to make sure they plan the budgets properly for the ramp up and the ramp down of the cloud? Now, the biggest one is the users. Before, the user is to simply attach a 20 meg file or a 50 meg file in an email and send it. Today, now they will, in the future, they'll have cloud attachments, right? It's a different way of changing behaviors, changing patterns. And how do we showcase that? Here's how you'll do your job differently. And the example I'll share is a financial planner. Before, he used to meet with you or me. We used to go to the office, review spreadsheets. Now it's a video call. It's a virtual call. Think about how much time that saved. We're sharing screens. We're doing the reporting beforehand. Files are being shared and dashboards are being shared. It's a new way of working, and say, this will help you achieve this much more gains at the end of the day. Instead of having 5 customer calls a week, now you can have 15. What is it in for them, and how do we make their lives easier, better, faster as well?
Yeah, this is a area that I have a ton of interest around, right? Because really, when you're selling a platform, you have to have a value-focused conversation. You have to, right? Because if you try to have a feature and function conversation, like, oh yeah, we can do this also, like, right? If you try to have that conversation, then you're missing out on all the change management activities, the training. Really, you're also missing out on potential additional benefits you can make for the organization as well, right? So I'd be interested to hear you mentioned something about helping out with migration, right? So what do you? Well, let me ask this: what are typically some of the objections that customers have from migrating from like a competing product into a single platform, and then what's Microsoft's answer or assistance they provide regarding that?
A couple of things is, of course, is risk. Many customers are very, very regulated in some controls, some areas. Compliance standards are there, and the question is, okay, the auditability of my email. I don't have confidence, or I'm not sure that my email is regulated, it's secure, it's compliant. Please show that to me. And to have the lawyers actually talk about that, right? To say, okay, here's how we do things. Before you used to do it this way. Now in the cloud world, your attestation policies change, your compliance policies change. But do we give them the confidence that it meets their industry regulatory needs? It's a different conversation, and you're making sure that they feel comfortable and they're signing off on it as well, because the journey to the cloud is IT, procurement, user, legal, compliance, all these different teams, and say, I agree and I support these decisions. So
Right.
it does take time, and that's why the journey is multifaceted, and that's why the platform can say, look, here's how we can absolutely show the custody chain of an email end to end. Here's how things will work, and give everyone the confidence that we can meet their needs.
Yeah, and so let's talk about the buying team, right? Because it sounds like to me to get a platform in place, it's not a transaction. It requires multiple people within the organization to buy off and approve, right? Give me your typical scenario about all the different teams you would typically have to connect with to do a successful platform sell with the customer.
Absolutely. So first is a compelling need, right? What's their reasoning? What's happening? Is it a data center reduction? Is it cost reduction? What's happening there? And that could be any business leader. They may be having mergers and acquisitions. How can we support them? So of course, it's that business conversation that's compelling the need for the change. And majority of time becomes a technology conversation where they want to minimize costs. So the IT guy, the business leader, what will this gain for them? What is the value for them is number two. Of course, understanding various scenarios from the various finance teams, the marketing teams, the sales teams, and so forth. How can we help make their job better and easier? So the user side of the house. Then the legal team. The legal team comes into play, and they have a different point of view, saying, I truly need to see where is my email, who's hosting it, what country is it in, make sure they understand that. So we've already hit 4 teams now, and then you bring in procurement for the different aspects there in terms of the cost, the risk, because before they pay for software as a one-time deal. Now it's a per month per user cost. How does that change in their model as well? And then
Yeah.
lastly, at the is of course the implementation side as well. It may be very
Mhm.
IT folks, maybe business folks. How do we support the journey? How do we support the transition to the cloud as well? And the ongoing side of it.
Right.
Before the cloud is now multifaceted. You have the audit software, the storage software. All these things need to come into play. And some customers say, "I'm only moving email today, or I'm only moving storage tomorrow." So how do you
Right.
help them along the journey and be that partner with them from end to end?
So far I've heard one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 different teams that may or may not even be in the same department. But one thing I do want to kind of touch on, I mean, I think is really interesting, right? So, you've been doing software sales for your entire life, right? And you've been around it and you know what it's like. I think it's very interesting that as you talk about having a platform conversation, how little you actually touch IT now. So, like, for example, you started with the business leader, right? Absolutely. If you can get a business leader to see the value in enabling another capability as it relates to helping them be successful, they become your primary sponsor. Then you engage with IT to say, hey, we got to figure out technically what this means. You got to engage with finance, as you mentioned, like, hey, this is changes for you and what's in it for you, the legal teams, procurement, implementation, support, right? So, I mean, tell me, as you have seen the conversation to platform change, what do you look for in a seller in terms of the characteristics and skills to successfully sell a modern workplace or a platform solution?
That's a great question. There's lots of sellers now. There have been software sellers, but now we're becoming more industry specific. Do you truly understand what's happening in the retail sector, the financial sector? Can you truly go into the weeds to say, hey, Mr. Financial Planner, before you did your job this way, now you do it this way, and understand the differences that Microsoft or Amazon or Google can offer you? Because let's be honest, a lot of these things are commodity. Heck, anyone can give you email. You want email? Go to AOL, right?
Right.
What is the difference that
Do they still have email? I don't even know.
they still have email, and dial-up is still one of the most profitable divisions. So anyone can give you the basic stuff, right? But what is our stuff going to do to help you do things differently? How will it help you your supply chain? How will it help my favorite one is you're in the life science and the pharmaceutical space. How will we help you do better data analysis and genomic research? So if a seller can truly understand the industry and the value we can add to the industry, that's a different conversation. And an example I'll share is Windows. Windows is Windows, right? But Windows in automotive for the assembly line to help the robots build the cars, it's a different conversation versus Windows for an ATM machine, right? But can we highlight the value of Windows as a platform to be secure, more efficient, work with third-party machines and AI functionality? That's the conversation our sellers need to understand that align to the business vision, the business justification, and the value that we'll have at the end of the day.
No, that's great. And so let's maybe kind of dive into that a little bit more, right? So you've been in sales forever, as I mentioned. You're a sales leader yourself. And I'm sure a lot of the sellers, especially in the software sales world, typically, at least my understanding, have been very, product focused, talking about features and functions. You know the story, right? As a manager and a leader, how do you coach your sales teams to shift out of having that IT only technical conversation and venture out into more of a business value conversation?
So one of the biggest things in my team, man, we were just talking. I have a monthly business review coming up. We review the top deals, we review the compelling events, and we ask the question: at the end of the day, when the customer buys our software, what will change for them? What will change in the sense that the way they do their job? Are we helping them lower costs? What's the before and the after? And at times, our sellers go, well, they're gonna buy more stuff, and they can never truly get into the reasoning why. So as leaders, as managers, it's up to us to ask the questions to truly say, are we aligning to business value? And one of the things I'll share is, we had a merger and acquisition customer. There were two big firms consolidate, and they were looking to buy our software. We go, great, they're going to buy, but what will it do for them? The biggest to the customer said was, I can now see the calendar of the two different organizations. That alone is a godsend, right? More so, right, is the fact that now not only can I see the calendars, I can securely share the content back and forth, right? Before, it was going to the ether. Now I have a little more controls. I have a little more security behind it. And that was the decision point the CEO said to say, this is why I want to go to this platform and help standardize the business.
That's great. No, and so what I'm hearing from you is, as a manager, as a leader, there's a lot of coaching involved in getting the sales teams to focus on the right things. So let me ask you this. I mean, and I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse, but I am interested to hear your thoughts. Let's say that you come across a seller or a sales team member that's not getting it, that's not able to bridge that gap between having the IT conversation to a business value conversation. What now?
So If they're simply mired in IT, right? The behaviors will showcase that. And also now let's be in frank transparency, the seller's compensation model has changed, right? In the sense that they're not simply gold on selling software. If they're selling widgets and software and they haven't sold the value, we'll see that hey,
Or
customer
usage.
is
Yeah.
not utilizing it, the usage is not there, and you'll say, hey, what's the worst that could happen is A, your compensation goes down because sellers are very coin operated,
Right.
respectfully, not all, but it also because they're not utilizing it. You'll see the risk coming in the second year when the customer says, you know what, I don't need all these things. I'm going to go ahead and true down and say I'm not buying more. And that's the impact to you, to the business, and the corporation. So I think our CEO has done a great job in changing the behaviors based on compensation and focus to say it's not only about the selling, it's about the usage as well. And
Yeah.
our
No.
CEO
Yeah.
has a great line. Every time you sell a contract, his line is welcome to the starting line. You're just beginning the journey right now.
Right. No, 100%. And I think that's a good call out, right? Because in my experience, sellers, they're going to move on two things: what their managers ask them to do, and what they're compensated to do. So if you're hopefully doing both things, it kind of helps move the needle a little bit, right? No, good stuff. And then so maybe kind of shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to get your take on a few other kind of aspects. You talked about, ensuring to have the business value conversation. That's something that's very near and dear to me, in my heart. What is your coaching to your sales teams around where to get that strategic information for their customers or potential customers?
So,
Is there a specific, uh, approach you take? Is it just boots on the ground, spending time with the customers? What are your thoughts?
so I'll share a story. I spoke to an account manager one day. I asked her, "What's a bank?" You know what they did? They pointed to the ATM machine at the corner. I said, "Okay, that's a piece of a bank. What else?" And she goes, "What do you mean? Amit, that's a bank right there." But the bank is multifaceted. There's risk, there's compliance, there's audit, there's treasury, there's investment banking. All these different managing directors have different goals and different priorities. What is their goals and priorities? Then I asked the question, have you read the company's 10K? Have you read the CEO's letter to shareholders? Have you understood the industry? What's disrupting them, right? And every CEO's 10K says, these are the risks we see. This is the challenges we see, whether it's international trade or tariffs or whatnot, right? They talk about that. Have you spent the time to learn that? And then, of course, whether it's Forbes or Business Insider, they talk about the fact that here's what's disrupting this industry. What are these disruptive these startups doing that may have the bigger company concerned, right? How do you have that conversation and truly go down and ask those challenging questions to my team, to the account team, and say, okay, tell me more. I read this. What does this mean to them? And now it becomes a different conversation where we're not inspecting, but we're seeking to learn, seeking to understand.
No, it's great. I think it goes without saying, there's so much information out there for so many public traded companies just simply in their 10K, simply in their shareholder report, like you mentioned. And you'd be surprised. I'm always surprised at how few times that resource is leveraged, right? From sales teams, there's just a wealth of information in there. So that's really good. Um, you also talked a little bit about the industry. You talked about focusing on making sure that what's going on within the customer's environment. I think building credibility to have that conversation is always a challenge also for a lot of sales teams. What are some of your suggestions, right, for sellers out there to build credibility quickly with a business leader, right? Like let's say that sales teams have always engaged with IT, they're comfortable talking there. What are your thoughts? How do you bridge that gap? What are some tips and tricks from Amit?
Of course, in the 10K, you'll see the various leaders and whatnot in terms of the board of directors as well as the executives. But if you go further down, right, you'll go into the LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a great tool, and whether it's managing director of finance or the managing director of retail, right? Follow them on LinkedIn, see what they're talking about. They're all these leaders want to show thought leadership, whether they're presenting at a conference or they're being keynoting at some event. engage them in that capacity. Hey, I heard you at this event. I would love to learn more about this. And let's be honest, we're human beings, right? But you're talking about yourself, that always changes the dynamic, and people want to talk about their work. So that's been a great way to engage, to connect as well, and go from a learning perspective. Hey, Mr. Executive or Mr. BDM, I heard you say this. Well, I have a differing viewpoint. Can we discuss this? And hey, people are social beings. They want to engage, and hey, you may have some thought leadership as well.
That's great. No, and I think your suggestions, if you're unfamiliar with that territory, to your point, business leaders love talking about their priorities and their issues, and simply asking to learn is a great way to at least start a dialogue, right? In terms of building credibility, you touched on something too that was really good. Differing viewpoints, right? We always know about the challenger approach, right? I know myself, I've seen that approach work incredibly well, because I think that a lot of business leaders have a lot of yes people around them, right? Yes, I agree with everything you're saying, but when you come out of left field and you say, no, I don't think you're doing it the right way. There is a better way.
Yeah.
And you bring a different perspective to the table that seems to not only build credibility, but give you some attention too.
Agree, right? And by showing a different viewpoint, hey, I appreciate that, I respect that, but let me share with you a different point of view and have a meaningful discussion about that, and it changes the dynamic and changes a way to have a meaningful connection as well.
Right, 100%. Now, one last couple of questions I want to ask you, and I know we're getting close to our time here, but we talk about successes. But I think you can also learn a lot from failures, right? Could you share maybe an example of an opportunity where, you were like, we got this, right? We're in there, we have a strong story, things are going well, but for one reason or another, things didn't, come through as expected.
Well, one of the things I'll share is, right, we had an account team and we were asking the question, okay, today they're on-prem, they're going to move to the cloud. And in full transparency, the account team goes, Amit, don't worry, we got this under control. The CEO is my best friend. I play golf with him every weekend. He's my kid's godfather. Don't worry, it's a done deal. But so I started asking the question, have you spoken to a legal team? Have you spoken to a security team?
Right.
All these different things. He goes, no, Amit, don't worry. So we kind of walk away, right? And then we learned that, respectfully, the CIO was not the one making the final decision. It was actually a new leader that came in, the chief digital officer. And they go, listen, well, we're a 200-year-old company, 150-year-old company. We want to do something different, right? And that different is, yes, technology is technology. It's just email is email. I want to change the way our behavior is. And they went to a competitor platform. And when we asked the account team what happened, he goes, my guy, my coach, my Fox wasn't a decision maker. He was overrode. But I said, do we have connection with that person? He goes, we didn't even make that connection because we thought
Right.
that we were good. Everything was ready to go. We even gave pricing. But guess what? The new leader who came in changed the landscape, and we were unprepared for that, nor were we even engaged. And now, respectfully, they had alignment in a whole different arena. The competition had alignment in a whole different area, and they brought that forward. And now they're going to a very different competitive solution. And we missed that ball because we weren't aligned to the right stakeholders.
No, that's thank you so much for sharing that. I know that typically you want to talk about like wins, but it's just as important to dissect. You learn more from losing than you do from winning, right? And so I think the lesson there is, you got to understand who the buying team is, because especially in a platform strategic investment decision, very rarely does a single person, make the decision. Even in the CEO in today's world, their job isn't to make the final decision, it's to facilitate a conversation and get consensus and bring the organization forward as a single unit. And so Yeah, a very easy, I don't want to say mistake, but very easy thing to overlook. Always understand who is part of the buying team, right? What is the process? Who's on the board? All those things, and you got to really align to each of these individuals, right? As part of a value selling conversation to be successful.
Right.
We're at time, Amit. Thank you so much for connecting. I always enjoy our discussions. It's so great to connect with someone who I worked with so long ago. You haven't changed a bit. I hope you don't ever change. You've always focused on value. I know it's sometimes you get pressure to just get that number to just get things done. But I've always appreciated the fact that you've said no. You said, no, we got to do it right. Even if it's a longer way, you and I both know that it always ends up in the right thing, both for the customer and for the company. So with that, I'll just ask any last few words you'd like to share, any suggestions, any tips. You don't feel like you need to, but I want to throw that out there.
No, and I want to thank you, Jamal, as well, is the fact that the work you're doing today in terms of actually highlighting business value, the business stakeholder map, and the mapping journey has been definitely instrumental in having a different conversation and truly showcasing the success of moving to the cloud or moving to a new solution, what it truly means to the customer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amit, for your time. Have a great rest of the day, and I can't wait to have you back on so we can talk more.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Bye.